everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of Finally Game Music. I am your host, Kristoffer Schenström, and this is episode 148. This was a very special one, as last Thursday we had a little chat together with the composer Steven Melin about his soundtrack for Beard Blade. I actually joined him in, so people who were attending through either our Facebook page, Patreon, or in our Discord would have been able to see the link for his composer show, which I guessed and he guessed in my podcast. So we kind of made a connection there. And it was just, I was so freaking nervous when I joined in and having my first live interview. I just thought that so much things could go awry, but everything worked out just great in the end. A little bit to note on my part of this track that we recorded. I sound a little bit weird sometimes, but that's because for some reason, as we were joining in on the Zoom conversation and meeting room, my mic actually went up and down. I tried to make the best out of it and tried to keep it at a good, stable level here. But I hope everything will work out great in the end, and I hope you all enjoy this interview. And with that said, Steven, please take it away.
Hello, what's up everybody? Welcome to the live composing show. You might already notice that here at the top of the show is a little bit different because today is actually an interview day. I'm really excited to have you guys join us today because we're doing a live interview with Chris from Finally Game Music, which is a Swedish podcast, which I'm really excited to chat with him. So I have him on a call today. And this is his show. So this is his podcast. We're doing a live recording. So everyone who's in the live chat right now, we got Sean, Matt, Marie, Erlen, Juice, Old Pup, Matt, and several others who are popping in here. So glad to have you a part of the show today. It's going to be a ton of fun. And basically, we're going to be talking about the creation of the Beard Blade soundtrack, which was actually a 6-year development process, which is actually the longest I've ever spent on any video game in my life. And it was one of the first of my professional career that I started on. So it's really cool to watch working on that over all these years and the transformation of having to start on one computer and finish the soundtrack on another computer, which led to creating my own samples and a whole lot of things that I'm sure we'll dive into throughout our chat today. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Chris at Finally Game Music Podcast and everyone in the live chat. If you have some questions here today, I'd love to step in and answer some of those as we go. So look forward to it. So here we go. Let's jump over to Chris. Hello.
This is exciting. I'm actually just super excited. First of all, very well done with the soundtrack. First of all, I actually played through it quite quickly, and I was just super excited to reach out to you and basically, hey, you want to talk about the soundtrack that you made? Because it's not the first time that I'm listening to the soundtrack while playing the game, because I've been listening to this soundtrack for quite some time, as they actually posted it a little bit here and there on their Twitter channel, and I just saw the graphics and I just listened to the music, and it was actually the music that drew me into the game. So that is super exciting, first of all, when we do and check it out over there. But yeah, as you said, we will go through questions that I have, first of all. But second of all, if you guys have any questions in the chat, I will try to follow it as good as I can, so we can get each and every question answered, especially for the podcast itself as well. But yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for asking. Like I was saying before, this soundtrack has just been through a lot of ups and downs, and if nothing else, it's just nice to be done. It's nice to say it's out, it's done, and I think in total, the soundtrack, I think we only used 30, maybe 40 tracks, but 70 were written.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of cutting at the end, which really hurts, all my little babies dying, but the one cool thing about the soundtrack release is I got the permission and the rights and everything to still distribute all of the tracks that I worked so hard on. And it's nice to kind of get that validation, and I definitely appreciate it. And I'm happy to chat with whatever you want to ask about today.
Yeah, so that is amazing. But yeah, so as an introduction for this is episode 148, and we'll be talking about the Beard Blade soundtrack. And this is more information for the podcast and not the live stream right now. And this is actually my first live stream as well, so I hope some of my listeners will also come on to the live stream and answer their questions as well. And for those who are not used to my podcast, I actually gone more international, so it's finally game music and not just a Swedish podcast. So from like 30 episodes back, it's all in English now. But I have, for those who understand Swedish, over 140 episodes as well, with different composers and by myself talking about different thematics. But yeah, so just to get a little glimpse, so your live stream viewers also know, this podcast is about getting the composers out in the spotlight. There's a lot of us gamers out there, and we have no clue who makes all these amazing tunes that we are listening and super enjoying. Because there's a lot of people out there who just love like certain soundtracks, and they have no clue who has been behind them. So that is basically my part, playing the part of, hey, who did these songs and what have they done before, if you want to listen to what they did before or what they have done after that. But yeah, so today we're talking about Beard Blade, and one thing we usually start up with is talking a little bit about the game. But first of all, before we dive into the Bearded Blade, we want to know a little bit more about you, Steven. Maybe your people over the live stream surely know who you are, but for people who are listening to the podcast might not know you that much. Usually I go down and I write down a lot of information that I find on the internet. But you are a special case, my friend, because I didn't find that many written interviews with you. Most of the interviews I found were podcasts. So I think instead of me writing down everything you're going to say anyway, let you present about who are you and where did you come from? What led you into composing in the first?
Yeah, sure. I think if nothing else, I think that exposes where we're at in the entertainment industry right now, that people would want to do podcasts over written material. I think it's very interesting that that's kind of where we're at, that most composers now are on YouTube or they're on podcasts or they have their own shows. It's just very fascinating. Well, just as quickly as I can, just to kind of summarize my musical journey, I started playing piano at a very young age, about around 7 or so. Absolutely fell in love with the ability to play what I was thinking. Meaning, if I heard a soundtrack that I really fell in love with, I could actually sit down and play it. And that was really my entry point to music. I was taking piano lessons, and eventually that turned into violin lessons and playing in orchestra and such throughout school. But really my true connection to music was, if I hear a tune from my favorite video games, my favorite films, TV shows, I can sit down and play it. And that was always really important to me. So as I started getting better with my skills, I wanted to make sure that I was also writing music. And that just kind of naturally came. And everything I was writing almost always had a video game tint to it. Because if you were to look at my favorite soundtracks of all time, I really love film. But as much as I love the great soundtracks by John Williams and James Horner and just any of the big Danny Elfman, the legends, right? The only thing I love more than that are video game soundtracks. The David Wise soundtracks and the Nobuo Uematsu and Koji Kondo. I mean, those are mostly Nintendo composers, but that's what I had access to. I grew up on Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64, and then eventually PlayStation and the rest. But that's what I was very early exposed to. So even to this day, it is shocking how my natural inclination, now 20-something years into writing music, whatever, that I go back to my roots every single time. When I'm not trying to compose, when I'm just writing what I'm feeling or thinking, it always goes back to like those early, the Final Fantasy sound, the Donkey Kong Country sound, the Super Mario World, the Legend of Zelda, Super Metroid, like the games that truly shaped my sound, that are still 90% of what I write. I love that. And you can't run away from it. And as I try to teach other composers how to come up with their sound, their unique sonic identity, it's always that. It's what do you love? What do you love playing? What do you love listening to? Because chances are that's what your sound is. And that is certainly the case for me. And just kind of fast forward, I've always been curious with music. So every couple years, I'll pick up a new instrument because it's really fun to me to learn something new. And if you can't tell from behind me, I mean, I just love whacking things. Anything, usually string instruments, to be honest. More than anything. I have a hammered dulcimer over here. I have a giant open piano. I have like 3 keyboards and synth, and it's almost always string related. So basically, my sound now is, if I'm not writing chip tunes for something like Beard Blade or Monster Sanctuary, I'm writing orchestral music for live orchestras and choirs doing this big epic thing. And they couldn't be more opposite. But I think that's the fun of it, is to write, to tell a story through sound, through emotions, in a way that is just different every single time. And that's kind of my story in a nutshell, is just I'm always musically curious, and it's to stay interested in what I do. I like to experiment with new ideas, like new instruments. That's typically the route I take.
Oh, that's nice to hear. How many instruments do you play to date? Too many?
I don't think it's not a fair question, because I think there's a difference in proficiency and mastery. So proficiency just means you can play it well enough to record it, to trick somebody that you hired someone to play it.
Yeah.
Versus, the masters, they can play virtuosic things. So my bar of excellence when it comes to music is I want to play everything I touch to a level of proficiency. But truly, there's only one instrument I've mastered, and it's piano. If we're going by the standard of 10,000 hours plus that I've truly put into practicing and playing, it's piano, it's keyboards. But that's the world we live in right now with sample instruments. If you play keyboards, you kind of play everything.
Yeah.
But that's also why I like to touch instruments, and that's why, of all the random things, I own a hammered dulcimer, because I've been writing for that for several years. But until I actually play one and learn how to play it, and all the intricacies of the mallets and the hammers and the placement of the notes, now I have a totally different respect for the instrument.
Yeah.
That now I can actually write for that thing instead of taking a piano part and throwing it onto some other instrument. So there are more instruments than I have time in this life to learn, but I'm going to try.
We all do our best. And we usually try to focus on different kind of things at certain points in time as well. But since you seem to like to try out different new instruments and such, which is the latest one you have right now that you want to learn?
This thing.
The big one. It's a large piano for people who can't see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gutted out piano that I'm going to turn into an 88 key dulcimer. So I actually have mallets over here, and I have to tune the thing. So I have tuning hammers. I've spent 2 weeks tuning it, and it's still not in tune. Because every time I turn, it's like a over 100-year-old piano. Every time you turn one of the 3 strings for one note, they all go out of tune around it. Ooh. So I have to just, like, every day do a little bit until the whole thing's in tune. So we'll see.
It's like, hope you like puzzles as well.
But there's something very cathartic about it. I'm not a mechanic, so I don't go work on cars for fun. Yeah. I don't like puzzles. I don't, like, my downtime is like instruments. Like that's what I like to experiment with.
It's your passion.
That's me. Yeah.
That's nice to hear. So now we got a little bit glimpse of who you are. I noticed that you have an interest for gaming as well. You talked about the larger series here, Super Metroid, Zelda, and so on. I can also see Mario behind you. I know you had that one in the interview you did for Monster Sanctuary as well.
Yeah, from this angle you can't really see much, but there's a Monster Sanctuary book behind me. Back there. Yeah, whatever. Some Pokemon stuff. I haven't worked on Pokemon, but I've done some remixes. Because I didn't mention this in my story, but the first, 10 years before I was really taking composing seriously, I was a video game piano cover artist. And that is still how a lot of people know me, or they get into my world because of that. And that was a huge part of my life. And that's how I got into YouTube.
Okay.
That's how I learned the basics of editing. And that was always a really cool side gig for me, is learning how to arrange.
Yeah.
And fun story, that is how I met my top client that I still write for. Full and Scholar Productions. I do all of their shows. And we're working on a project right now, which is huge. And all of this orchestra stuff that I'm doing now and live choir, it all comes from that. Because we connected because I was a video game cover artist and so was he. And years down the road, just as we became friends, he started needing music for his projects. And it just kind of goes to show that just go be a real person, go make friends, and be authentically you. If you love something about this industry and you go do it. I don't really have the time now to do those anymore. That was just for fun, but who knows? Maybe one day again. That's always been a fun part.
But it's really interesting. I also noticed that you had an account on one of my favorite remix sites, as OC Remix, back from 2017. I didn't see that many covers there, so you posted most of them on YouTube, I guess, then?
Yeah, that was the very end of some of my last ones that I did. But I covered over, 200 songs.
That's insane.
From games for about 10 years. I mean, I did that all the time.
Yeah, but it's got to be insanely fun as well.
Yeah, it just doesn't pay. It's a hobby.
Yeah.
No one does that to get paid because it's pennies.
Yeah.
Unless you're the top of the top and you're touring and
definitely.
I don't know. That's not something. I hate that. I hate not getting to do something because of money, but realistically, it's a hobby, and maybe another time.
Yeah. Have you ever heard about the Dwellings of Duels, for example?
Yes. Yeah. They don't do. Do they do cover music?
They only
contests?
Do cover music, but you're basically making your own covers, and you have to play at least one instrument. The rest of it can be digitally made as well. I just thought that might be the most suitable for you, for example, going into that, because that is an amazing kind of a community that they have and monthly listenings and everything.
Yeah, I did through Full and Scholar. So Travis, my good buddy Travis, he entered. There's too many stories to tell right now. We haven't even talked about Beer Blade yet. I know, right?
We're coming.
This is why we. I know. But Travis, he's an accordion player, and he's actually traveled the world doing video game music covers. Which makes him one of the coolest clients in the world because I'm writing music for him, but he can actually talk in music back. He can say, no, use a crescendo there. No, use he can use the music words and knows the instruments. One of the coolest things about him. But yeah, a few years back, we did a world tour album. We went to Florida and we played once, but it's a world tour. It's kind of a joke. So when we produced the album, this is insane. Whenever Travis asks me to do something, unless there is a really good reason not to do it, it's always a good idea because he's just a fun dude. So he had this insane idea of, hey, what if we record an entire album in one standing, one session? Let's go book this really expensive studio in Florida, and everyone's going to learn their parts. No one's ever met each other, and we're all going to meet in the studio, and we're going to record 12 songs in a row. And it was insane, and we actually did it. And we had a show that night. So we recorded all day, had a show at night, and then it was it. And then now we had an album. But that is, what was it called? The Dwelling of the Duel?
Yeah.
He submitted some of those for that. So I do remember I have some affiliation with this. I don't think we won anything, but
that is amazing to just have something to put up on that page anyway, because I usually download most of it, and I just love listening to each and every tune. It's just amazing. So
that kind of thing's fun. I feel like that is a past part of my world that actually, even though I don't do it anymore, that was probably the best schooling I ever had.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. So
because when you study other composers' music at that level, where you can literally not only play the note by note of what they wrote, but interpret it in your own way as a cover artist, you understand the language and the tools of that composer. So that's actually part of why YouTube was such a big thing for me, because now I can teach people how to write like Nobuo Uematsu. I can teach people how to write like Koji Kondo because, and those are still some of my biggest videos, because I just understand the vocabulary of what chords they're using and what instruments they're using and the form and structure. And that has been the greatest education for me writing video game music, because now I get it.
Yep.
It's just in me. So I would never undo that. And I would recommend, if anyone has any desire to do that, that will teach you more than a college degree ever could.
No, I think that is well said, because that's a lot of things that I notice more and more composers are talking about. Just trying out other people's work will make you understand how they write and why they do what they do, to a certain degree, of course. Up to the next degree is up to each and every individual on how to interpret that part. But that is really well said, so I totally agree with you, and yeah. So, with that said, let's dive into the game we're here to talk about. Now we know you a little bit more, so you know where you came from and what your interests are. I think that is the best way to kind of get to know you firsthand before we're diving in and talking about how you are thinking and what you do when you're actually composing music for a game like Beardblade. So first of all, the game here was made by an indie team of 2, and they used the name or company name Glovebox Games. So Beardblade, it is a platformer game, or run and jump as they call it, where you basically play a sheep farmer or sheep herder, Branson. I actually didn't know the name until like late in the game. I was like, oh, he has a name.
Yeah, I don't know if they say it for a while.
I think they talk about it the first time he meets a person, because the conversations are not back and forth. It's basically one-sided, and Branson is basically just talking back, but not through text. So that it's really fun to kind of interpret the game itself when you are playing it. But you are meeting this fantastic Forbeau, and he has the power to bring forth a person's most outstanding feature, which in Branson's case is his fantastic beard. And after meeting him, you will be able to control your beard and use it as a weapon against the enemies who have stolen your sheep, which is called the Smugglins, which is also such an hilarious name.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, they take your sheep and smuggle them away from your island. The Smugglings is just too good. But yeah, that is basically the basic concept. It is a platformer game. You're running around, you're hitting smugglings, and you're finding hidden stuff throughout the game. And then we enjoy these amazing tracks. And I think before we start talking more about the game now, we will listen to the first song of this week. And this is the track You Chose. It is Charlotte Shipyard, and this is the day version of it. So, yeah, that was Charlotte Shipyard Daytime. And yeah, I usually have what I called a feeling. This is basically me listening to the track, closing my eyes, putting on my headphones, and just listening to this song on repeat. I've actually renamed this one and just call it my inner journey now. And my inner journey for Charlotte Shipyard Day is a very relaxing go to the beach tune with an industrial twist. The tune have a sense that drags me all through the day, and some parts of it makes it feel like it's morning, while other parts makes feel like it has a nightly touch to it. So that was my inner journey for this one. And this is also one of my more favorite tunes of this soundtrack. I was so enjoying it while I was jumping around in this level.
Oh, thank you.
So what was the thought when you started digging into this song? First of all, maybe we want to know a little bit about, since this is a little bit further into the game, when did you start working on this track?
About halfway through, I think. So with all games, there are reference tracks, or there is a mood or a feeling that you get some kind of notes from the developer.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about this particular soundtrack is this is one of the first commercial games I ever started working on. So if only I knew now what I knew then, or reverse that, you know what I mean? It's funny, I didn't really know what to ask for in the early days of writing video game music because just inexperience, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But specifically with this track, I knew that there were a few game soundtracks and a few games that were obvious inspirations to this game.
Mm-hmm.
You can probably guess what they are. Super Mario World is one, Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Country 2,
yeah.
Rise Star on the Sega Genesis,
yep.
and what's another one? Sonic the Hedgehog, probably number 2. And what was really cool about the early days of talking with the team is we have like the exact same inspirations. And that's what made the collaboration so fun, especially from the beginning, because our visions were totally aligned.
Yep.
And as soon as I got to get my hands on the game and start seeing some screenshots and gameplay footage, all the way back in 2015, this is a long time ago, I was just instantly inspired. Every single time I saw these characters, I saw this beautiful artwork, which, by the way, Aaron Clark, the lead developer on the team, he's an animator, and that's his day job. And so he's done some like really high profile stuff, including Star Wars and whatnot. So like he's the real deal. His artwork is so beautiful.
That is
and
nice.
It's so fluid, especially when you play the game 60 frames. Oh my gosh, it's like butter. So that gets the shining crown. If nothing else, even if you don't like the game, the art style is so beautiful that you gotta give it a shot. And actually, in the early days, we were gonna do a Kickstarter for this game. And we did, and it actually did not pass, which is a shame. I think that was maybe right around the time when Kickstarter projects they were struggling a lot more than they used in previous. But they did an opening animatic, like they did an actual hand-drawn animation. It's still on YouTube if you want to look it up.
Yeah.
The Kickstarter trailer, and it's so beautiful. And they asked me to score it using better sounding instruments and whatever. But just the animation's so beautiful that it's hard not to be inspired. So this particular track, I'll try to stay on track here. Shallot Shipyard, it was originally called The Harbor. We didn't know what it was going to look like, so I just wrote it based on the description. So I imagined the carnival level from Sonic 2. That's immediately what I thought of. And what was interesting about this game is they wanted a blend of Super Nintendo aesthetic and Sega Genesis aesthetic.
Ooh.
Which, if you ever study the music, they're very different.
Yeah, they are.
Because even the creation of the sounds, SNES music is all sample-based, where composers would go out into the real world and they'd find real sounds, and then they would downsample them and bit crush them to the tiniest little size to fit within the tiny memory of the chip.
Yep.
And what's interesting about Super Nintendo is every composer had a different sample set. So the good composers, all the guys I mentioned before, they were making their own samples, or their team was making their own samples that was unique to that game and no other game, which is why I think to this day, the Super Nintendo soundtracks are legendary and they will never go out of style because they're timeless.
Yeah.
Because they were unique to that moment. No one could ever duplicate it again. Unless, of course, we use sound fonts and like rip the ROMs or whatever. But Sega Genesis used an FM synth, which is a synthesizer where you can make any sound, but it's always going to have that really harsh
crunch to it,
sound, very crunch. And those two worlds do not blend.
No.
So I had to make a decision on a few tracks in the game. Is this going to be Sega, Genesis style, or is this going to be Super Nintendo? And this one, I think it's pretty obvious which one I chose. It's Sega, because I used FM synths. And part of the authenticity of this game is they wanted to blend these two worlds and obviously represent 16-bit era music, but the visuals are not 16-bit; they're 32-bit.
Yeah,
and we had to come to an agreement that we're going to treat this like Shovel Knight, meaning Shovel Knight is a retro 8-bit platformer, but it's not 8-bit.
No.
It's like 16. It's one generation ahead on purpose because that gives the fluidity, it gives the modern day aesthetics, but with that kind of retro lens.
Mm-hmm.
And so with audio, we did the same thing where we're going to fool the average person that this is retro 16-bit Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
But if you go back and listen to Super Nintendo music, it's very, very limited.
Yes.
And it's not as fun to write with. In fact, David Wise himself has often said, I will never write for the Super Nintendo again, ever. Because it was so soul-crushing to go through such great lengths just to do one little 4-bar phrase. It's spending days and days programming and meticulously. Whereas now you can just, hold down a note on your MIDI keyboard and get the same result. So I understand that. And so I wasn't going to go to those lengths to make it authentic, but I want the flavor, basically. In the same way that if I'm going to cook Italian food, I will never capture the essence of a true Italian master chef, but I can follow a recipe and kind of get close, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is my attempt at kind of blending these two worlds. So that I think we need to know that going into this soundtrack that, number one, I did not use VSTs. I did create my own samples, both Super Nintendo style samples and FM synth style samples. They're not authentic because they don't actually work on those machines, but they are very close. And that was the goal, is to have the flexibility. Because even with Super Nintendo, you only had the limitation of 8 channels at once. This track is not 8 channels, it's like 12 or 16.
I was going to ask that.
Polyphony, and it just wouldn't sound good. It wouldn't have the same fatness, the same groove, the same edge without that. And so you have to kind of know that going into this. What we're listening to is not truly authentic retro, but it is my interpretation.
Yeah.
And that is a style right now, and I think it's really cool. And it's something I feel like I do well, and it's something I want to keep doing.
Yeah, that's nice.
Because the next soundtrack I did was Monster Sanctuary, which is identical in styling, where like exactly the same, where they said create your own samples in the style of Super Nintendo, and I'm like, cool, I've already done it.
Yeah.
They actually hired me because of Beardblade, so you can kind of see a progression of, oh wow, here's someone that actually does this really odd niche thing. So it's catching on somewhat,
that is nice. That is really, really nice. So, but you said you've been working on this project for 6 years. You've been going from different computers as well. I know we touched a little bit when you talked about the VSTs and everything. Matt Creamer asked a little question earlier. Tell us about the software.
Matt, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt is one of the sound designers for this game.
Oh, that's nice. That's
so
nice.
He made authentic, or my interpretation of authentic, Super Nintendo's Sega Genesis. He made hundreds of sounds for this game, and he and I were talking recently about what a difficult task that is.
Yes,
it's almost impossible. You have to create your own stuff from scratch because it doesn't exist.
It's crazy. It is really, really crazy.
Go ahead.
But yeah, he wrote this. Tell us about the software difficulties that occur when trying to work on a project across many years. How hard was that to open old project files? Did you have any VSTs from the 32-bit era?
Short answer is I started the project on a Mac and then built a PC halfway through the process, not knowing when the heck this game would be done. No one knew it was going to be done or how big it was going to be. When we started the game, the devs, this is their first game. They had huge ambition. And if I do believe that if the Kickstarter had been successful, I think we were asking like $90K. Like, it was going to take a ton of money, a ton of time. This is going to be a full-time gig for the guys. I think they could have done it.
Yeah.
Because they would have had the resources and the team they needed to do it. But when the Kickstarter did not succeed, they had to bootstrap, and they said, okay, we're going to make this thing anyway, but we're going to do it at night. Like, is it going to be an hour at night for 3, 5, 7 years, however long this thing is going to take, we're going to do it. So I think they had to scale down considerably, which is heartbreaking.
Definitely.
But I'm glad that we can sit at this side of the fence saying, yes, it released, at least it exists, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I know there's a lot of Kickstarters going on, and there's a lot of them that actually does not meet the requirement, but the developers are so eager to continue working on their projects and everything. They either make a new Kickstarter, or they work day and night, basically making 2 jobs, having their game development as like a freelance type of thing. That does not pay at all because they're working on their own shit.
Yes.
But
and I think in this case, just to answer the question about the file transfer, you know, I knew I needed a new computer because at that point that one was getting very old. And it's now my kid's computer, just to kind of put that in perspective. It does not function as a work computer anymore. It's too old. But I had to make this decision of, okay, if I switch over to PC, that's where gaming really is. I want to continue writing for these new soundtracks and stuff. I need those tools. What am I going to do? How the heck do I continue this project when everything is in Logic, which is a Mac-only software? How the heck? I had all these custom samples on there. What am I supposed to do? And so I said, okay, here we go. You know, I'm okay using Contact, which is a software for creating your own libraries. And so I just I bootstrapped it, and I said, okay, here we go. Let's figure this out. So I turned every instrument that I had made into a Contact sample. That way I could load them on my PC as well and have the exact same sounds.
Yeah.
And then I could transfer over files and keep writing. So I'm actually not as happy with the handful of tracks. Thankfully, we were like 90% done by that point. But I'm not happy with all of the final tracks I wrote because they're not 100% the same as the original. And I can hear it. No one else would ever know. But it's just, you know, a personal artistry thing.
Yeah, but it's also depending on if they are able to listen to what they were before and what they are now at the same time.
I don't know if I want to share that information.
Yeah, but because you will always have that in mind, what you could have improved, what you learned, but you will take this and you will take it towards the next project as well and make that one even a better project as well. So we all live and learn in these kind of ways. And I'll add that. Yeah, thank you.
I'll add that Monster Sanctuary was my opportunity to use all that I learned from all these failures and go 100% into Monster Sanctuary, because on that soundtrack, very similar process, I actually collaborated and co-wrote a lot with Peter Jones, another composer, who, because I learned how to do this Contact sampling thing, I was able to share the exact same instruments with him. We could both work in 2 different programs at the same time and co-write together using Google Drive.
Yeah.
And that was partially in response to the pandemic and trying to figure out how to do a soundtrack together. But also because we live in different parts of the country and there was no opportunity to meet. So I think technology is there that if, you know, when there's a will, there's a way, and you're going to figure it out.
Definitely.
And that actually taught me how to do that with your own samples, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see more and more happening as well. I feel that composers today are getting more and more freelance rather than in-house. They are still in-house, but I see more and more composers go freelance today. So it's super interesting to see that the pandemic comes with something good as well. First of all, maybe not everybody likes to work from home, they want to work at an office and so on, but as you said, co-composing becomes more of a crucial part in the development as well. Sometimes there are multiple composers and they work on different tracks, but from my experience of understanding what it was with Monster Sanctuary, you actually worked on the same song sometimes as well.
Yes.
But for Beardblade, you worked all by yourself, correct?
Yes. And it's funny how different those experiences were.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have a preference one over the other, but I don't think I'm ever going to go back to solo.
Okay.
Because it's
more fun to do it together with somebody.
It is more fun. It's just creatively inspiring to feed off of someone else's energy and their ideas, especially when I hit a dead wall. You know, if I'm just out of ideas for this track, and then Peter, for example, can just take it and then write this really cool drum and bass portion, and then I can write a melody on top of it, and then he writes the chords. Like, there's this really cool back and forth that happens that actually makes a better soundtrack.
Yes, nice. I think it's time for the second track, so we don't talk about everything after the first track here, because this one kind of goes together with the first one to some extent, as we are going to listen to Caraway Bay, the night version.
Yeah, so that was Caraway Bay Night. And I should say that every level in this game has a day and a night time. So if you leave the level or go to another level, then they all shift.
Yeah.
To day and night. They're totally different routes, totally different, basically different levels.
Yes.
Restructured.
There are some similarities as they have some level-wise base kind of set to it, but then you will get to like a Y crossway and you can either choose left or right. In this way it's blocks blocking you off either night or day cycle. So yeah, each time you're visiting like a slot on the world map, because you're walking around like Super Mario style, Super Mario World here, and Super Mario 2 and 3. No, 3, sorry.
Yeah, Wario Land is probably an even closer
comparison. I've not played Wario Land, to be honest, so I need to play that one.
It was the Game Boy version of Super Mario World, basically, so it was much more stripped down. I think this more resembles that.
Nice.
The simplicity of it. Yeah.
So you have day-night cycles, and that even goes for the music as well. That's why I actually chose the night as well, which was super interesting. So my inner journey when it comes to the Caraway Bay night version here is, this is the Donkey Kong Country of the soundtrack. Very calm, breezy, and I love the simplicity of the tropical tune. I can see myself on Hawaii with a drink in my hand to this track. Because you have like the kind of easy kind of going here. I really enjoy this one. Just playing this tune and playing this level in the game, I want to stay here. I want to listen to this track.
Oh, that's the greatest compliment. It's like you want to stay in a level just to listen to the music. And that was my experience with Donkey Kong games. And to this day, if I go back and play one, I just kind of want to sit there, push pause, and just be there.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's the genius of David Wise is that. Like, I love his music.
Definitely, I love them too as well. There are so many. I actually started playing through Donkey Kong Country games, and I started kind of re-experiencing all the different tracks. I have my favorite ones. You have the aquatic ambience from the first game. One of my favorite ones from the second game is Sticker Bush, for example, Symphony. So good. And one of the later one I started loving a lot is Jib Jig, for example. Yes. And there are some tracks within, for example, just to kind of complement as well here. When you're playing Donkey Kong Country, for example, there are some tracks that, to me, while playing, because Donkey Kong Country is such a hard and stressful game at some parts, I actually got lost in the music. But for this game, even though I got lost in some kind of like small minutes and game moments, I never got lost in the music. I actually heard the music like most of the time, all the time. It kind of fell in good together with the experience I had while playing. What was the thought you had when you started composing? I understand that you had a couple of references that you wanted to strive for. Even though you're having kind of reference material, what do you think about mostly to kind of put a twist to it so it doesn't just, this is Donkey Kong Country, for example?
Man, I think it comes down to the samples themselves. For example, this game has a ton of accordion, an instrument I never write for. It has a lot of oboe, and originally some of the bonus tracks on the album, you'll hear it has like a ukulele type sound. Whatever it's called. It's some kind of string guitar instrument. And early on, I experimented a lot with finding the sound. Like we wanted an island sound. Yeah. Which you could draw a lot of parallels between Donkey Kong 2 and this because of the whole ship aesthetic and the pirate. But I didn't want to lean into hook territory, which is what Donkey Kong 2 did in a large way. That John Williams type sound. For like the big epic orchestral. So I think for this, I wanted to stay on the goofy side. And one of the conversations I've had with some people is this soundtrack transforms quite a bit. Meaning when I first started, it was a goofy, whimsical game where, I mean, the whole concept's ridiculous, you know, this guy fighting with his beard. So I wanted to score that. Like, let's write some fun, upbeat, energetic, major key music. And so I took a lot of inspirations from Grant Kirkhope, who uses a lot of, not to get too nerdy in the music, but he uses a lot of chromatic mediance, which is using two major chords back to back that are not related in the key. Okay. So for all the music nerds, if you're in the key of C major, you jump to an E major all of a sudden. So it's this shocking modulation that makes you like kind of raise your eyebrows. And he's a master of that craft. And so I kind of borrowed from that. And Caraway Bay was the very first track I ever wrote. Okay. It was the daytime track. Yep. It's so happy. It's like obnoxiously happy. And I remember once I submitted the first version. They said, speed it up. Okay. Speed it up again. Speed it up again. And it's just like they wanted it faster.
There's the Sonic part about it. Gotta go fast.
I mean, it's like obnoxious. I can't listen to it anymore. That's why I didn't pick it, by the way. It has become my least favorite track on the whole soundtrack because it was the first. Yep. Because I feel like, even though it's a cool track, I enjoy it. I don't think it actually fits the game anymore. I think it fits the original idea of the game. And that's why so many tracks had to be scratched at the end, is because tonally, thematically, we went for whimsical and happy and goofy, and then all of a sudden it started transitioning more to like serious and foreboding and ominous and all of these things. And you can see it in the level design too. Yeah. And perhaps on some meta level that I can't understand, perhaps the music, because of the length of the soundtrack, of the development, 6 years, perhaps the music actually outlines Branson's journey. If you think about it, because it starts off really happy and really energetic, and it gets more serious, and then, oh no, the stakes are really high. Oh gosh, they're getting really high. Yeah. And then, I won't spoil the ending, but there's a plot twist that the music gets like super dark. Yeah. And it's like, whoa, but it's still in this chiptune style, so it kind of makes you go, whoa.
Chiptune always makes stuff happy.
Yeah, I mean, you can't not, but it goes more to the epic territory.
Definitely.
And even, one of actually, the next two of the tracks we're going to play today are very serious, and those are actually my favorite. Because I don't typically write very happy, energetic music, but that's what the game called for until the tone shifted. So,
but how did it feel for you to kind of go and make music that you kind of, well, you have to do it because they're paying you for it, but you're still not like 100% onto the happy tracks. How do you feel about working on happy tracks when you're not really like 100% happy track composer?
Well, I think this experience called for it. Yeah. Like, I was so into the beard thing. I thought that was the funniest thing in the world. Yeah. And every time I would share with people, I'm working on this game called Beard Blade, they're like, what? Yeah, you fight with your magic beard. It just, everyone that ever heard it just laughed. And they're like, that's the greatest thing ever. I have to play this. And as soon as you see it, that first level running around the beach and punching with your beard, it's so funny. And that was originally going to be the first level. And I'm actually glad that they didn't. Yep. I think if we had stuck with the original ambition of the game, which, by the way, was like an RPG, it had a town, it had upgrades and all sorts of, had like different suits with fireballs and like, I don't know, it was more like, it was much more like Super Mario World. Yeah. Very cool, very different, but because it was RPG like, kind of more like Shovel Knight, where there's NPCs and you talk and there's shops, and it just got too big.
Yeah,
and it wasn't doable. But that would have worked RPG wise. But you kind of see how story wise they had to have some kind of intro of why are we on the island? Why did our sheep get stolen? So then they start introducing these more ominous tracks. That might be a perfect segue to the next track, because the next track, Enemy Territory, is the first track in the game.
Yeah. So maybe we should play that one, and we'll continue to talk more about the soundtrack after that one.
Sounds good. Enemy Territory. Here we go. And then it loops from there.
Yeah. So that was Enemy
I like that track a lot.
Territory. Yeah, that one was really good as well.
Favorite.
If I remember, you chose this one as well. So yeah, definitely, I really like this track as well. So my inner journey for this one, dark, something's amiss. The track marched like trumpets, but I think it's the accordion playing there. Part makes me think of Luftrauser's OST, which was also freaking good, because they have the same going on, and I just cool. So good. The song also reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy music to some extent, especially with the falling apart part. Cool. A track that makes me go down memory lane.
Oh wow! A lot of guys in the live chat are saying it sounds like Final Fantasy. So that's funny.
So it's kind of fun that because I usually just write these on top of my head, just listening to the track, trying to get in each and every kind of melody there is to it. And since I'm just closing my eyes and just taking everything in audio-wise with the headphones, there's some crazy ways and that my mind works, and I go to different kind of memories. I can see myself playing a game in front of a TV and so on. And just going through this track was just like I was all over the place with certain sections of the music here, and I just loved it a lot. And as you said, this was the first one you start to hear in the game while you're playing, while Caraway Bay is one of the earlier kind of stages you play. As you said, Caraway was the first track you did, the day version. How usually when you're doing like the first track, you're usually setting like a red thread for the rest of the soundtrack.
Yes.
But for this game, it's kind of hard to put a red thread through it because you're going through a lot of different places. How was it to compose for this kind of soundtrack when you're all over the place?
Oof. That was the challenge. If there was one challenge, that's the one, because early on, I was trying to come up with some kind of fingerprint, right? Like a sonic identity for this soundtrack. At first, like we discovered with Caraway, we didn't play it, but there's a lot of accordion, there's a lot of oboe. It had this, I wanted accordion to be the beard blade sound because like this manly instrument that kind of represents a beard. But the more we got into it, it didn't work on any of the darker stuff. As soon as they wanted more emotional tracks, it just doesn't work. It's too happy and goofy. So I started leaning a little bit more into the piano and a little bit more into the strings and the brass, until I don't even know what track it was, but one of them I started writing this little da 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 da, like this brass fanfare that became the motif, meaning like a little theme that eventually, every time we wrote something more serious or heroic, it was supposed to be Branson's fanfare, basically. So every time you get a collectible, or you beat the boss, or one of the bosses, or whatever. There's all these different little fanfares that all reflect that one little idea. So we couldn't do it with instruments because it was too late in the development cycle to like start over.
Yep.
So instead, I tried to do it musically by whenever possible using brass. And here's an example of this track was probably halfway through the cycle. So I wanted to make sure that it kind of had this heroic feeling, even though there's all this dark stuff happening underneath. It also helps that we were on some kind of pirate ship. You don't know that at the beginning until it crashes, whatever.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, we're on a pirate ship. So it had to have some kind of low, ominous feeling to it, like something's unsettling. You said. And then by adding those little fanfare moments on top, it kind of musically says Branson is in a scary place. Something's going to happen. And they ended up using this track in a ton of areas in the game. So it actually works really well as like a general bad guy theme.
Okay. So the fanfare part of the accordion is more towards Branson then, so to speak.
Yeah, I think so. And anytime you hear brass, and not to spoil the ending of the game, but there's a lot of moments towards the end that I lean really heavily into the brass to kind of say that, oh, the brass is going to win. It's like a fight between the evil sounds. So like piano is always evil in this game, which is kind of funny. Because it's always these low boom, boom chords. But anytime you hear brass, it's like Branson trying to overcome the evil as he goes. So there is some symbolism there. Yeah,
so the accordion is a little bit more high-pitched. The brass is a little bit more high-pitched here. So basically, the thematic for this one is basically we have the brass instruments being the hero version of the tracks themselves as well.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. I really like that type of composition as well when you're looking at it. I really do enjoy those things happening, especially when you are able to do so within a soundtrack and it fits really good. As I said multiple times, I will continue to say it, I really did enjoy the progression throughout this, but most of all, since there are so many different places within this game, there are a lot of different kind of tracks as well. So it's just... I just find it super interesting that you kind of found a red thread in the thematic of the different areas you come to, because each and every map is basically like one section of one style of music. So in the beginning you will be at the beach, and in the second part you will be in, if I remember, cave. And then from there you come up to the beach and just visit a lighthouse, and then you continue on and on through different kind of versions, and we will end up even in like an industrial part as well. I'm just thinking, what the hell happened on this island?
I think they were really trying to model the Donkey Kong Country style and the Super Mario World or Wario Land.
I can definitely see the Donkey Kong reference.
It doesn't have to make sense, but there's clearly there's a tone to each area.
Yeah.
Because I know, we have a short track list today, but going to the forest, it's super ambient. That was the most Donkey Kong-like I think I've gotten in the whole soundtrack. Very inspired by the woodwinds and the synth type sound. But you go to the harbor, like we listened to earlier, the shipyard, it's this big, upbeat, synthy stuff. And then you go to the, there's like lava areas, there's cave areas, and the whole idea was let's capture a tone that works instrumentation-wise for this little section of the island, but thematically, the themes, like the notes I'm choosing, should represent the overall story.
Yep.
Which I got. That's the RPG model. I love it. It's let's write a few little themes that are going to appear a million times throughout the game, but let's change it around every time based on location.
Yeah.
Which is unique to video games, which is probably one of my favorite parts about games.
And that is nice.
This puzzle. It's so much fun.
So we have an interesting question here from Old Pup. Do you have any tips and recommendations on developing a personal Sonic identity?
Oof.
I know, since we've been talking a little bit about the references here about music, and that Sonic was one of them.
Yeah. I think we hit on this earlier, just this idea of transcribing, basically doing covers of other musicians that you love. Probably one of the best ways to do it. because you're learning the music theory, you're learning how to actually play notes that represent something you love, and it becomes part of your vocabulary. Like right now, I'm working on a game, and the style is very Dark Souls-esque, very much in that style, which is very medieval, very gothic, very orchestral and choir heavy, right? So that style demands a very specific type of composition.
Yeah.
And so what did I do? I went and I learned how to play some Dark Souls pieces on piano and playing on a keyboard, playing with strings.
Yeah.
And I literally learned the voicings. I learned if I spread my fingers out this much to get this chord shape, this gives the sound that they're looking for. And if I record a string ensemble that is the exact same size as what they use for Dark Souls, it's going to sound very similar.
Yeah.
And now I have my back pocket. I know exactly how to capture that game soundtrack sound. Now I can use it for whatever I want.
That's nice.
And that's what I mean. It's a very practical way. I'm just dissecting something I love so I can use it for my own skills, honestly.
Yeah, so looking specifically for this soundtrack, did you already have everything in your back pocket from your 10 years of working like in remixes and stuff?
I did, because all of the reference tracks I had memorized. I could play every single one of them.
Oh, that's great.
I've played every Super Mario World track on piano. I've done all those covers. I've done every Zelda track, just about every Donkey Kong soundtrack. And once it's in your DNA, it's like, duh. Yeah, you want it to sound like, the B level from Donkey Kong 2? Yeah, cool, let's go.
So
it's like, I know what that means, on an emotional level.
So in case of like getting stuck in like a pocket of, hey, I can play like this Super Mario song, what do you do to kind of twist it, to turn it into your own? What is your identity when making music that defines you as a composer?
I can't speak for everybody, I can only speak for myself, but to me it's the sound. The literal instrument sounds that I'm using. This is why I'm such a big fan of creating my own sounds. Even on an orchestral album, on this other project I'm working on, I literally still create my own sounds because that's important to me. It's like Old Pup mentioned in the chat, sonic identity.
Yeah.
Well, what more of a sonic identity can you have if you create it yourself or if you fashion it yourself for your own needs? And I think chiptune in particular has the most power to do that because that's what the masters of the past did.
Yeah.
They made their own sounds. So if we don't go to that level, then we're not going to capture the same heart as using someone else's sounds,
I agree. I agree with that one. So looking at the soundtrack, we have a lot of different songs on this soundtrack. You even have posted on Spotify with the soundtrack, and we can see that there are even some unused demos there as well. So there are a couple of songs here that you have been working on one set, and then you ended up with something else. How many like songs in total did you do for this one? Is everything here, or was there something that you really needed to I can't even post
there's
this?
There's always revisions.
Yeah.
Meaning there are, when I uploaded the soundtracks, there's 70 tracks. So realistically, there's probably, if you counted every version, there's probably like 150.
Yeah.
It's a huge number because every time you write a track, when you make some changes to it, it's going to be different. Like the melody changed or the instruments you chose changed. And, some of these go into 3, 4, 5, 6 revisions. And you can't call it a different track, though, because it's still the same piece of music at its core. So if that was the case, I just posted the final version, right? Because it's in the game. But as far as the unused demos, they were attempts at writing a track for a level or character that it was just totally wrong.
Yeah.
And they just rejected it, and it was like, no, try again. And okay, fine. So I'm glad I can have them all in one place at least. So this, I still think, represents the bulk.
Yeah. Okay.
Minus the the not as good versions.
The failed attempts.
Yeah. I mean, we all do that.
Yeah, one thing that is really important, this goes even for game development as well. Usually I am working with game development, and I have been audio director as well because of this podcast. Okay. So I don't work on sounds specifically myself, but I know sounds and how they are supposed to work together to some extent, within games at least. But looking at composition-wise, when you are working for Beard Blade here specifically, which song did you have most problems with? Which one was like the more part you had issues with getting the right way, either for yourself or for something with the developers here?
I'm gonna look through the soundtrack real quick just so I can be my memory refreshed.
Yeah.
This is 6 years of content.
Yeah, 6 years is a pretty long time.
Let me look. Oh my gosh. I don't even know.
So this is Charlotte Bay 1, 2, final, new, final.
For real, yes.
This is all true, folks. This is what happens even in games.
Based on the track list, it kind of answers itself. Look how many unused demos I have of Forbeau's Barbershop. I have 4 unused demos.
Yeah.
Not to mention the final, which is version 5. Like, separate try number 5. And then all of the failed versions. You know what I mean? Yep. So that was probably 10 attempts. So that one definitely had the hardest time. Because Forbeau is the sorcerer guy he's the barber.
Yep.
Who gives Branson his powers, right? So it's important musically that you have to pick a perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same as film music, where you have to have a conversation with the developers about what are we trying to tell with this music. Are we trying to say what Branson is thinking, or are we trying to tell the truth of what's really happening, or are we trying to write music that is completely opposite of what's happening?
Yeah.
So I think early on, when I was starting in the very whimsical, happy soundtrack, Forbeau's Barbershop was just kind of this really fun, happy, jazzy, cool, we're going to the barbershop to get our power-ups, you know? And it just changed a lot. And then another version in there was like super sad, like a solo piano.
Yeah.
And another one was like over-the-top, swing, jazzy. And it just took several attempts to finally get on the same page. I'm happy with the final one, though, I think.
Yeah, you think?
I mean, it's not my favorite track. It's probably my least favorite track in the whole game.
Yeah.
So it's because I think it's the least representative of the soundtrack.
But could it also...
Because it changed so much, you know?
Yeah, but also it is also the only shop track you have within the game.
That's true.
So usually when you're listening to soundtracks on games, shop tracks are usually the ones that sticks out the most. Usually.
Oh, yeah.
And one reason why you could not be super happy with it was maybe because of all these attempts as well. Could that be a factor, you think?
Probably.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Because at some point when you are a composer and you're presenting something to the developers, you're like, I'm happy enough to show this. And you're showing it and they can blindly just say, no, it was not what we were looking for. And then you're like, oh, but what were you looking for? You gave me this material and I got as close to it as possible without copyright striking it. Because I find it really hard when you have this type of kind of work. As a composer, somebody's always going to, I want this, I'm after this, and they show you Donkey Kong Country soundtrack, and you're like, okay, I can do that. And you do that, and it's not the Donkey Kong Country because you can't rewrite Donkey Kong Country because
exactly
that would just be ripping things off, and then there's like, oh, this is not Donkey Kong Country. What is the hardest composition part when it comes to these parts when a developer is just showing off like we want these references?
Well, I never want to bash the team.
Yeah.
This is their first game. I have noticed a trend.
Yeah.
This is just universal.
This
doesn't have to do with games. This is a universal thing I found is whenever you work with a client the second time, you're tight. Like, you understand each other's vocabulary on a very deep level. Yeah. And you can write music almost every single time. Version 1, 2, or 3 is the final. But when you work with someone for the very first time, it's like version 6, 7, 8, because you just don't speak the same language.
Yeah.
And I think because this soundtrack was so big and it was so long, that it took like 3 or 4 years to get to that point where, okay, I know exactly what you want now.
Yeah.
20 tracks in, okay, cool. I do know exactly what you want. Give me one reference, tell me a little bit about it, give me a screenshot, something. Okay, it's going to be very close to what you asked for.
Yeah.
And I think that's always one of the frustrating parts of working with somebody new, and it's no fault on either party.
Yeah.
It's simply the newness.
Yeah.
You don't understand each other yet.
It's like getting onto the honeymoon. It's like everybody's lovely-dovey.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, it's lovely to make music. And they're like, oh, we're getting music in the game. And we're like, this was not exactly what we wanted.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally understand from my perspective as a game developer as well. So that is good to know.
Yeah. And all the more reason why I believe people like to work with the same team members time and time again, because you learn each other. Like, the second project's always better.
Yeah.
The third's even better. The 10th is a masterpiece. You know what I mean? Because you learn. Because right now, I've worked with one person, one team, Full and Scholar. I've worked with them more than any other client. And that's why I say they're my top client, just because they take the most percentage of my time. These are people that I'm on the phone with every single week, sometimes multiple times, for long periods of time. And it's like, I know what he wants when he asks for it. Without him saying a word about music. So he doesn't send me reference tracks very often.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to. It's like, here's the scene, here's the character, go.
Yeah.
Have fun. Because he knows that I'm going to
set the mood right.
Give him what he wants.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the joys of experience in this industry.
Yeah.
Is the more you do it with the same team members, man, it gets better. Like, it gets more fun. Because there's less of that tension.
Definitely. No, so I usually say this at the end, but we'll get back to it as well. I know there's a question about it as well. Like, when you're a new composer, how do you get things to your portfolio? But we'll take that later. I just want to add that one thing to keep in mind when you are a new composer, try to find and speak the same wavelength as the person you are working with, and then try to keep that friendship for as long as possible. Because the more confident you are in each other as developers or movies or whatever you're continuing to work with within music, it is important to speak the same language. If you're doing that right off the bat, then you have something.
Yeah, and that is worth so much more than a paycheck.
Yeah, definitely. When you can set like each and every song over and over again, then you can be really productive. And I think that is a good thing for a composer as well, so you're not stuck making like 10 revisions of one song, for example, because it takes a lot of time and some people might get bored quite fast, for example. I don't know.
Yeah, and even the soundtrack I'm working on right now, just to give like more behind the scenes of how this stuff actually works.
That's what we're here for.
I was having a conversation yesterday with the lead creator, and I tried 4 times to write a track, and each one was very different. And here we are working on number 5, and I was just like, dude, I don't know what else to give you, because these are all so different, and none of them are coming close to what you want. Yeah. So I need some clarity on what to do here. And he said, you know what? I love the last track, the last version you did. Let's just make it a battle track. Like, that is your bread and butter of what you're good at. So let's use your strength. Let's just literally change the project to match the music. Yeah. Because we have that rapport. We have that relationship where he will literally change the project to match the music because he cares about it that much. Because he knows he's not going to pull something I can't do out of me if it's not there. Because I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. And he was asking me to do one of my weaknesses, which is ambient music, if I'm going to be honest. That's not my thing. I like big, strong, melodic, in-your-face kind of stuff. And that's what we ended up doing. So you got to know that about yourself. And I think that's one of the cool things about good relationships is you can pick that out of each other eventually. Yeah. It's like, if you just keep trying your best, like, they might change it just to be nice.
Yeah, definitely. And also it might be better for the total project as well, because it goes back and forth at some points as well. We can't just like go straight through with just one way, because you are a composer, you are part of the team, even though you're freelancing.
So, but yeah, before we're going into the next song, we had one. I don't know if it's going to be a quick question, but one from Sean here.
I'll try.
So, do game dev teams have any particular issues with musicians when they pitch their work? Like, I've noticed some composers often don't understand how hard it is to code, and it is easier to just grab some sample packs. What are your experience here?
I feel like that's a question for you because you are a game dev.
Yeah, I know I am a game dev. Looking at composers from the composer part here, is it easier? I know you already said that you usually like to work on your own soundscape, but are you working with sound packs as well?
I just need some clarity on the question. Like, what do you mean by sample packs? Like using VSTs from other companies?
Yeah.
Is that, you think, what he means?
Or you can use different instrument packs that you can find and use for making music as well.
Yeah. When possible, I create my own.
Yeah.
But when I'm trying to emulate an orchestra or anything that is a real world instrument, I have to use a sample library. Because, like, I write a lot, like a strangely large amount for the hurdy-gurdy, which is an ancient medieval string instrument.
Yeah.
And I hate that instrument. I hate it. I don't like the sound of it, but it's a staple of what we're working on right now.
Yeah.
It's the iconic feature sound. And there are no good sample libraries out there, so I literally made one.
Okay.
I recorded a guy, and this was before I was really... that was before I was good at sampling.
Yeah.
So it's not my proudest achievement, but at least it works as a demo. So, like, to write for that instrument, you either have to have the real person or you have to have a really good sample library that can handle it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course I'm going to use a sample library for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But notice in that scenario, it was a weird, interesting thing, so I made it myself. I've done the same thing with dulcimer. I've done the same thing with... anytime I've recorded a choir or a strings, like real people, I try to take these recordings and chop them up to at least have some kind of my own sound, you know? But that's also why a lot of composers use the same musicians over and over and over again, because I now have relationships with musicians that I now write for a very specific violinist. I write for a very specific cello player and woodwind player. And what's cool about that is our careers are rising together.
Yeah.
Every time I get a bigger project, I'm putting them in the spotlight.
Exactly.
Because they're phenomenal players. And then maybe, this hasn't happened yet, but maybe if they're on a bigger project and they need a composer, whatever. I'm just saying, like, our careers are rising together and the notoriety goes up together.
Yeah.
Because some of the most famous composers out there have a select few people that they always work with, because I write for those people by name.
Yeah.
You know, and that's part of my sound too. Is if I can't play the instrument, if I can't make an instrument, I'm going to choose a very specific instrumentalist to play, and that becomes my sound.
Yeah. And to answer the game development part for Sean as well, so we have both areas covered here. It all depends on the different game developers. Usually people who don't know that much about audio, for example. I don't know how experienced they were in audio for this project specifically, but I know from my experience that there are some people that are not super experienced within audio and they just want audio in it. But at the same time, they have their own kind of vision of how the soundtrack would and should be, and those kind of people should not be the ones who ask for music, in my opinion, because they are the people who come to work, get their shit done, and then they go home. They don't sit in like the extra hour to just get something perfected, and that is the problem, in my opinion, when it comes to game development. You need to find these people who, well, not freely want to put in the extra hours, but that it's just a figure of speech. You want these passionate people who would like to go the extra mile, so to speak, to get things really, really good. And there's always, you need to kind of go back and forth between these parts. And I think that goes as well for compositioning as well, right? Because you can't really spend 12, 15 hours on just researching a track. And then they're like, okay, do you have the track? And it's like, no, I only researched it. I haven't even started yet.
Yeah, there's a happy medium there. You can't be an idiot and just go in blindly.
Yeah.
Because then you're not giving courtesy and respect to your teammates. But at the same time, you can't take forever on something.
Yeah.
Deadlines are real. Deadlines matter.
Yeah.
And the larger your team, the faster you have to be.
Do you have any preferable way of working? Are you working with like a deadline, or are you working like spontaneous over and over again?
Oh man, I always have deadlines.
Yeah. Do you have budgets as well that you hold? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I still consider myself pretty early in my career because I've only really been doing this professionally about 6 years as a full-time gig as a composer. But so I know that there's going to be larger projects down the line. But from the interviews I've done of AAA composers, that they all say the same thing, that once you start hitting these, 6-figure budgets, they do installments where they literally have a checklist. They have phases of, here's everything we expect by this date. Here's the budget for it. Ready, set, go. Yeah. And you check in at periodical moments. And that's how they get stuff done, because that's every single person in a 1,000-person team. Yeah. They all have deadlines by their project managers. And, music's the same way. And we have to learn how to write on deadlines and to spec. And we do have the freedom as freelancers to make our own schedule underneath that, so long as we hit the deadline. Yeah. But and to me, that's the fun part, because if you finish early, you're done. And my personality is I just want to keep working. But I've learned in recent years, especially having 4 kids, and a 5th one on the way, and very busy home life. That, man, to have an extra hour, like that's my incentive. Yeah. I want to be done an hour early so that I can go hang out with my kids.
An extra hour.
That's a huge thing for me. I love that. And that's a big motivation for me. And writing fast matters to me. Yeah. Because it means more time doing the things I love. Of course, I love my work, but it's still work. Yeah. It's still hard at times, and there's sweat equity and all that good stuff. But, that's my take on it. And the more you do it, the more you learn how fast it takes you to write music, to actually be done. And for me, it's usually 3 hours of my time equals 1 minute of finished audio. That's pretty on point. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I started my show, which is this show, the live composing show, because I've done it for a year and a half now, every single week. And it has taught me how to write to an exact amount of time.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice.
Within a certain time frame. And it kind of started as an experiment, but it's really made me a fast, good composer. Because it forces me to make decisions really fast. Whether it's a good decision or bad decision, doesn't matter. I just keep going. Yeah. Because you can always redo it. But if you go with your gut and learn to keep going with your gut all the time, you start sounding more like yourself. Yeah. Which is a very weird thing to say, but that's just experience.
You're
you write more.
Learning yourself, and you're learning your weaknesses to make them to an advantage instead.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
And with that said, I think it's time to go in on the next song. So
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so the next track we're going to listen to is Behind the Screen.
There it is.
Yeah, there we go. Behind the Screen. And my inner journey here. Simon Belmont, is that you? Oh no, it wasn't. It is, however, a banger with a more of a fast-paced sound that keeps you on your toes. This track could be just as much as in a Castlevania game. The setup for this track also reminds me of a Mega Man. So this is basically a track with a combination of 2 great games made into one.
I hadn't made a connection to the Mega Man one. Castlevania was a inspiration.
Yeah, I definitely heard in the beginning. That is so the Bloody Tears intro. I was like, oh no, it wasn't.
Okay. You know what's funny is I've never played a Castlevania game. Ooh. So I don't know that music at all. Yeah, so that's just coincidence. That's really interesting. They said they wanted it, so I'm sure I listened to a few tracks before I wrote it. But I think it's also because the setting is really the same. It's a haunted house.
Haunted house,
And in the game, just for the context, this is Mitchie's Manor. So there's a ghost that rules this haunted mansion in the game, and one of the levels you can go into a room and there's a TV with fuzz on it, and it's I forget what they call it, but it's like Glovebox Games has a TV, so it's very meta because you go inside a game.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Beerblade, -1 nerd cred for Steven. Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate that.
You should do your homework now and listen to Bloody Tears.
Apparently. I like Metroid and Metroidvanias. I just don't do Castlevania. Anyway, lost my train of thought. The music, I mean, you're in this, you actually go inside a TV, and Branson, Beerblade, turns into an 8-bit character, and then there's this whole level where it's 8-bit, which I actually think is probably one of the coolest parts of the whole game.
Yeah.
Because they nailed it. Like, the retro vibes are so real.
Definitely. No, it was one of my favorite parts in the game. One of them.
It's so smooth. It's like one of the best programmed parts of the whole game. And they switched the whole art style, and it's so... Like, you feel like you're playing an NES game.
Yeah, it's smooth like Shovel Knight.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I liked that part.
Yeah. So when you did this track should stand out, especially from everybody else, since it's an 8-bit aesthetic where this is played. Did you get more of a 8-bit aesthetic into the track than all the other tracks? Because it still sounds like a full-fledged track. It does not have any restrictions like 4 channels like they did on the NES.
I don't know if I did the restrictions or not, but I definitely, for this track and the boss battle that follows in that little game, I did use authentic 8-bit sounds. Because the thing with 8-bit music is it's very different from 16. 16-bit, we talked about earlier, is either FM, which is Sega Genesis, or sample base, which is Super Nintendo. Yep. But for the NES, the Master System, Sega Master System, anything truly 8-bit, you don't have any options. They all use the exact same bass sounds. Square wave, triangle wave, I'm missing one, saw wave. That's it. That's all you have to work with. They are very particular. Pulse wave, that's the other one.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, everyone knows what those sound like. The Game Boy used it as well. So there's no faking that. It has to be authentic if you want to sell that vibe. So I made... I intentionally went out of my way to make sure that was very authentic 8-bit. But I don't know. I was using a DAW like software, so I wasn't using a tracker for any of the super music nerds. Shovel Knight was composed in a tracker, Family Tracker. Oh my gosh, that is the most insane soundtrack. Oh my gosh, not only Vert.
Yeah, Vert is really good.
Oh my gosh, he's one of the best composers on the planet.
Yeah, it's him and hands Danny Barnowski in my opinion right now.
God, those guys are legendary because specifically for Shovel Knight, he programmed every freaking note. It's all code.
Yeah.
If you ever watch, it's just code, and you can literally export this Family Tracker session into an NES cartridge. So it is real. So that's huge props to him. I've tried it, and it's hard.
They also did that for Alva's Awakening.
Oh, okay.
So that one actually is existing on a NES card.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So that level of authenticity, I didn't do that, but I used the same sounds. Yeah. So because I use a DAW, I don't know. I don't really care if I followed the 4-channel format. I probably didn't.
But were there any difference in how you composed when you did this song other than the other tracks you did for the soundtrack?
I don't know.
Or was it still the same for you?
Pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Nothing noteworthy except for the sounds. Because I knew the sounds were going to sell it. You could write anything in that style. And I wrote a few other tracks actually in 8-bit that they didn't like. But for whatever reason, they liked that one, which was not my favorite pick.
Maybe because it was more Castlevania.
Maybe. Yeah.
They were fans of it.
No clue. Yeah. That's not my favorite track.
Yeah.
That's like one of my least favorite tracks, but I'm glad you like it.
Yeah.
Why
I actually
did you
picked
pick
it.
that one?
Usually, my train of thought, usually I let all the guests make 3 picks, and they usually pick their own favorites, even if there are their specific favorites or ones they had most fun in working with and so on. I usually take 2 picks that stands out. In this case, I picked one of the night themes, and I picked this one because it stood out of the rest of the soundtrack. So and that's basically why I picked my picks for this soundtrack. But it was really hard picking tracks for this one because all the tracks are really good in their own way, in my opinion.
That's very kind.
So that is interesting. And one thing I find interesting as well, as you posted this soundtrack on Spotify, you actually also implemented like every song in the game. You can hear the file select, you can hear the victory fanfare and so on. What was the choice for that? Usually people are handpicking certain amount of tracks for a release and a soundtrack.
I don't know. I mean, to me, I think people just like yourself. That's the reason. Because I think video game audiophiles, people who are just obsessed with video game music, as I am, I'm always sad when I have a favorite track from a game. I'm like, oh, I didn't make it on the soundtrack. You kidding me? Or you go to the YouTube, someone posts it, whatever, and it's like, oh man, I wanted to listen to that one thing and it wasn't there.
Yeah.
So to me, just make it available. It's there. It's just sitting on my hard drive.
Yeah.
Why not? The only time I wouldn't put something up is if it's violates any kind of NDAs or whatever, or if I don't have rights, or if, like I said before, if it was just a revision. To me, that doesn't warrant another track. Yeah. It has to be a separate piece of music. And particularly for this game, I really wanted to fight to get everything up because it's just been through this crazy development cycle. And some of my favorite tracks are the ones that weren't used, which breaks my heart. But it's just the way it has to be.
Yeah.
I can't argue that because it wouldn't be right to throw in a track that's not fitting.
Yeah. Not according to the developers, at least. In the end, it's their baby.
It's their
so
yeah, it's their game.
Yeah.
I want to support that.
Definitely. Yeah, so I really did enjoy this one, and the Mega Man part of it is basically the kind of the fast-paced part of it, and the high notes that you utilized in this. It kind of reminds me of... Yeah, definitely. And right now I'm listening by the end of the track here at the last seconds, and it kind of reminds me of like Airman stage or something like that from Mega Man. So
I do love Mega Man,
So I think
it's funny how what I love comes through in unexpected ways. You can't help it.
But it's fun how me as a listener kind of enjoys this, and you as a composer writing it as well. Maybe you didn't have Mega Man in mind, but for me as a gamer, this is what I'm hearing a bit of influence from. So it's really fun to kind of push and shove when it comes to listening to everything here. So looking at for behind the screen here, what was the larger reference for this song? Castlevania. That you didn't play.
That doesn't happen too often because, I talked about the other references that they gave.
Yeah.
They really wanted this to stand out. I think that it achieves that.
Okay.
Because it's so different.
But did it want to stand out from the other music you have in this area that you were playing? Or in which way did it want it to?
The point.
Okay.
Well, I think it stands out from the whole soundtrack, too. It's just so different.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about if they want something to stick out from the thematic themselves, or if it just want to stick out of the ordinary generally.
Yeah. I mean, their goal was to, from what I gathered, they want it to still feel like it's in a haunted house.
Yeah.
So it has to kind of have some darker chords, which is hard to do with 8-bit because you don't have tone colors to work with. You just have bleep or bloop.
Yeah.
It's like,
I'm
which
trying
one
to
do I
think
use? I don't know.
about, for example, the DuckTales. You have Transylvania, which is the Dracula mansion, which is kind of haunted house-esque, but I don't remember if it's happy or if it's dark. I just remember the whole track being very happy. I just mainly remember the moon theme like everybody else.
Oh yeah, that's the classic.
So that is really, really amazing. I actually didn't have any more questions surrounding this track, so I think it's good if we want to join in on the last track of the week. If you're filling up for it.
This is actually my personal favorite.
And your pick as well.
This one had to be on the list today. So this is Orzo's Oasis, which is the final area of the game. The boss's lair. Here we go. That one, that and the enemy territory are my favorite because they actually go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. You can hear the fanfare again.
that much was on purpose because I knew that enemy territory would be used towards the beginning of the game to introduce all of our bad guys, our smugglings, and then this was like our ultimate final challenge before the big bad boss of the game.
Yeah. And you do hear about him.
I tried to use similarities that way. They anchor each other. That way you kind of like you can't go to this level and think, oh, this must be like a normal level. You know?
Yeah.
Like there's this weight of something's coming. This is starting to ramp up. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
What were your thoughts?
Yeah. So my inner journey for Orzo's Oasis. First of all, Orzo is you mainly just hear his name throughout the game. You don't really know who he is or anything, and then just boom, there he is. But my inner journey here, mystic and majestic. This track does have so much evil written on it. It is just by listening, you know you're heading towards an boss battle here. As it grabs you by the spine and caresses it slowly enough to get you goosebumps. Yeah. So we're back at touching the trumpets. Brass here again from the enemy territory. I actually wrote that down. Could this be a better glimpse back to the music wise to the smugglings? But now we actually know, since we have talked about it, it is not about the smugglings, it is about Branson.
Yes. So, and the accordion makes its way back in there too, on purpose. Yeah.
So it's really fun that in the beginning, since I did all these notes ahead of time. It is kind of fun how I made certain references to something here, but I was wrong, but still awesome. It is connected somehow. So I really, really like this one. Yeah. But one question I actually had, and I wanted to say this for last as well. There are some tunes that are pretty long, some are shorter, but there are also one track that is like very unique. And this is like, when you're playing Super Mario, it is the star sound. For Branson, it is like the super beard polish or whatever it is. Oh, yeah. And I only found it on one level.
Yeah.
How was it to make music that is just used for that specific thing?
I haven't played the entire, every single level, every variation of the game. Apparently the game's twice as long as I was led to believe. Because I played through it on launch day.
Okay, yeah.
Just to kind of play the final version. Because they were like pushing to the end to get everything in. Yep. So I never even got to play the whole thing till it was out.
Yep.
But it's funny because I've watched some YouTubers play the game, and I'm like, I never found that. Never found that cool animal you can ride, like whatever.
Yep.
And so there might be more instances in the game. I don't know. But I've only found one too. I also know that they are working on some updates to get a little more content in there before considering some other consoles and such. You know, whatever. They're using this as a soft launch. So
God dang it! I thought I completed it 100%. I collected each and every collectible thing in this game.
Yeah, I know. Oh no, I got like 50% maybe.
Yeah, I continued to play one
goal was
level until it was 100% done.
Oh, good. Yeah. You're a collector.
Yeah.
Collectathon. Yeah.
I hate it.
I like collecting everything if there's a like definitive unlockable.
Yeah.
And they haven't told me. So because they know I'll blab it. Just kidding. I'm so into this game that I'm, I wouldn't share anything if I didn't have permission. But,
yeah. And there and stuff,
there are potential updates coming, which is really exciting.
Now, they're very frequent in updating bugs and everything. I know.
Yeah, they're really working hard.
I played the second day after release that I know it's out finally, and I just had to buy it instantly. In just the first 4 hours of gameplay I had, every bug and issue I found, I just posted it on their Twitter. Yeah. 1 hour afterwards, all of them were fixed, and just a thank you note.
Wow.
I was just like, hey, Chris found all those. Thank you. It's an update out now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's how a company should be, in my opinion. I know it's harder for some.
That's one of the advantages of being a small team.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is my understanding. Is that's why they've chosen to do Steam only for right now. They want to polish out all that stuff.
Yeah.
And get the game where it needs to be. Yeah. It's already fantastic.
Definitely.
But I know that there's a lot of people like this little thing, and so they're trying to fix them all and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, but just looking through what people have been chatting about during this last song, a lot of people has talked about Breath of the Wild here.
Yes.
Is that a clear reference as well, Zelda, for this one?
Yes. That was my own connection. So this is what happens in game development sometimes. So I had just finished Breath of the Wild. This is 2017-ish. I had just finished it and was enamored with the Hyrule Castle track. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And the impact it had on a relatively quiet game. All of a sudden you have this huge sweeping orchestral theme, and it was so powerful and so interesting. And someone nailed it. Who said, I think it was Matt. Yeah, Matt. He said the flat 6, flat 7 Zelda cadence at the end. So that is a Zelda trope. And in my Zelda video where I say the Zelda chord, I did this 6 years ago. I made a video on YouTube. It blew up about how to write like Koji Kondo, Zelda. And it's this very specific chord sequence. It's sounds like Zelda every single time. So nice. I knew I wanted that in there. So I put it in there and wrote my own melody and stuff on top of it. But really the fun and the reason I love this track so much is I think the perfect culmination of all of the soundtracks that we try to represent in one. Yeah. So for example, the bass line, I was just playing around on my keyboard and I said, what if I play the bass really high? And I'm like, oh, that sounds like Flight of the Zinger from the B level from Donkey Kong 2. Yeah. I like that a lot. So I got the Donkey Kong in there. And then, which, if you listen to the forest areas and some of the other areas in the game, have a very strong Donkey Kong ambience to it. So kind of check that box. And it's kind of went down the list. Okay, Zelda is a strong influence. Let me throw some Zelda-esque chords. Let's make sure that there's a strong Branson fanfare. But it can't be happy because we're in the darkness, whatever. But I did something I've never done before. I took this brass line. Do, 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 do. So if you listen to the title screen, it's bum, 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 bum. So that is the main theme. Yeah. That's Branson's main theme. You find little snippets of it in other parts of the game. But here, I thought, what if I take this theme and I stack it on top of itself in a minor key.
Yeah.
So what that means is it's there, bum 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 bum. But I took the MIDI data, the notes, and I drug a second copy of it right below it in a dissonant key. Notes that should not play together, and it sounds like this. Like it has this gritty quality because it's the wrong note the entire time.
Yeah.
It might sound like a mistake, but it's not. It's on purpose. And then I doubled that with strings and accordion and whatever else. So it has this like unsettling Heroes theme that's tainted by all this darkness underneath and this weird bass line going on. So that was intentional. I was trying to blend all these different game soundtracks together to create this like cacophony. And I think it works. And to me, it was like the one success story of finally like all the things. I put so much heart into this one track, and they actually used it. Yeah, because you could strip away a lot of these. But
yeah, was Orso's Oasis one of the last tracks you did for this soundtrack, or
no? It was somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
I won't spoil the ending, but if you listen to the final boss, that is this theme. Like amplified to the next level, and it's like taken way all the way.
It is needed.
And they told me like make this an 11 out of 10 intensity.
Yeah.
While keeping with the themes, and I love that. Like that I was able to find like in a soundtrack I always try to figure out before writing a piece of music where on the chart is this? Is this a 1 intensity or is this a 10 intensity? So when you have a plot twist, it has to be 11.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, I thought that was the end. Oh, and then it like whoosh, takes it to the next level. So the Orzo battle, the final battle, before plot twist, it is this theme, half of this theme.
Yeah.
So I hope that makes sense. So like Orzo's Oasis, as we're leading up, is Branson plus Evil combined.
They're going head to head.
Enemy territory. And then all of a sudden the battle version of it if this is like a 7 or an 8 on the scale, final battle's a 10, and then we go to 11.
Yeah.
And then there's this huge release of the credits theme, which is back down to like a 3, which still represents it. So, that's the kind of stuff that I've just learned doing this long enough now.
Yeah, they balance each other out as well.
You want the roller coaster effect.
Exactly.
That's good. It's dramatic.
Yeah, and that goes together with the experience. You always want, as you want 11 in music, you want 11 in game-wise action as well.
It has to be.
Sometimes it can be, depending on what type of game. For example, if you're looking at a hack and slash game, for example, that is kind of high adrenaline. If we take Diablo, for example, if you listen to the soundtrack there, the soundtrack is pretty calm, almost gritty to the part an extent, but you have this high-paced action going on all the time, so that is just a way of compensating and balancing the experience out. But I think for platformer games and older games specifically, they are more on par. They're going back and forth together rather than going against each other, usually.
Which is why we have to have a track like the one you picked, Caraway Bay Nighttime, where it's like a 1 on the intensity scale. And just like the nighttime music, Pimento Island, the world map, is like a 1 or a 2, because you have to have that level of low, so the highs
get even better.
Something when you get there.
Yeah. So one question I have concerning specifically Orso's Oasis here is I didn't necessarily have this true Oasis vibes to it, but I guess that was due to limitations of the selected instruments you used for this track, as it is not maybe too easy to make a classic Arabian thematic theme that is usually done for Oasis music, which is the stereotyped way.
Well, you should know I did not name any of the tracks.
Okay.
So if that tells you anything. So I have all my own titles.
Yep.
So I called this one Imp Lair.
This is like usually a question I have for all the composers, because it's always fun to hear like work in progress names for projects.
Yeah, so I mean, I always make up my own names for things unless the team changes them. I actually like all the names they chose.
Yeah.
Because the Smuglins were called imps. They were just imps until they had a real name. So this was the Imp Lair. This is like, we're finally fighting all of them. We're going to take back our sheep. Like, that's all I knew. So all I knew was the tone of what we wanted, and I feel like it hits that. Orzo's Oasis, I think, is more so from his perspective. Like, he's the king of the Smuglands, and so this is his territory.
Yeah.
And I think they're funny with their titles of like, there's a lot of hair references. Like, if you ever go back to your file select in the game, if you ever boot it up again, it changes based on your progression. So like they have all these puns. So there's like this whimsical nature to it. So I think, you know, Orzo's Oasis is like, they both start with O. That's about it. You know, I don't think there was any Arabian influence or anything like that, outside of it being a desert or a beach.
Yeah. No, I'm always curious about names for tracks and how it kind of coexists together with the experience and also the music itself, because there's always some sort of red thread to it in the end. So it's always interesting. Did you have any like whimsical names for any of the projects that you worked on that is more standing out?
One of them made it Hirsute Hero, so like hairy hero. Like they all had hair in them or a beard or like I forgot some of them. Razors and I don't know. Like you could tell that they did a good job, I think, at the end of the day, turning a joke of a concept into a serious game that is actually good.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? And I think there's a suspension of disbelief. You have to get like 10 minutes into the game and you're like, oh, they're serious. They're really going to make this a game where the hero fights with his beard turning into a fist and a chain ball and whatever, and like a mace.
Yeah. And a blade at some certain times.
Yeah, like these insane power-ups that are like, what? They make you laugh.
Yeah.
And what a fun... Like, that reminds me of Shovel Knight. Ridiculous concept. Let's go fight, save the world, you know, shovel of justice, whatever. Let's go fight the world with a shovel. But then it's, like, really heartfelt and serious about this deep love story. And the music's so intense that you just fall in love with it. You're like, of course we're going to fight crime with our beard, you know?
Yeah, but when it comes to retro games as well, they were kind of whimsical. They didn't always make sense either. So I think it kind of harnessed true core of retro games as well, even though they're making it new. As people usually call it, but some people don't like it, the new retro. And I kind of prefer it to some extent, but I just say it's a game in the end because that's what it is. They just make reference to what they love. And for me, it always was about like Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis, as you said as well. But a lot of people are making reference to Game Boy Advance, for example. Does that go for music as well? You say? Because they were kind of... going on the same strings here. There are some changes in the Game Boy Advance when it comes to the chip they had for it, but maybe it didn't have any inspiration or anything to it.
Well, from the day one, they considered this a love letter to GBA and Super Nintendo. So, thankfully, one of the things about those two systems is they had almost identical audio capabilities. The GBA had slightly less power. In the fidelity of the audio, but I believe it was still 8 channels. It was still sample based, and that's why they
had some improvements with the chip as well. But it also came with limitations, of course. Yeah,
and I think so long as I adhered to, let's nod to the past, but let's not stay in the past.
Yeah.
Let's use modern technology. It's the Shovel Knight thing all over again. Let's improve upon it, and let's see what we can do. In the same way, when I was playing through, originally the game had lives and a game over screen.
Yeah.
You could die and have to start over, and like old retro games, but they decided there's no point in doing this.
Yeah.
This is an outdated mechanic that no one likes. That's just annoying to lose your progress on something in this culture of people actually can play a game for 5 minutes and come back to
Definitely.
it. Especially if this is ported to other consoles that really lend itself to that.
Yeah.
Where you can play for 10 minutes and you're done and you just want to pick it back up.
Yeah.
And I think dying and having lives, like checkpoints matter. Because if you die, you go back to the checkpoint instead of starting the whole level over because you died too many times.
Yeah.
I just think it's a very smart choice.
And just the checkpoints are gorgeous in this game.
Yeah, no, they're
the barber poles.
The barber poles, yeah. Yeah,
but
that's
for this game, did you also work on sound effects, or was it just music?
I do actually have a sound designer credit on this. Originally, I tried, and it was very difficult because I'd never done it before for a commercial game. I'd done it for fun, just to experiment, and some of my sound effects made it.
Yeah.
But here's what I learned. I'm really good at making musical sound effects. So the musical ones stayed. So like you push pause, like the pause menu, that kind of sound, the file selects, like these musical type sounds that are which I studied this and I wanted to figure out how did the masters of the past do it. And you go look at like Super Mario Brothers, and like Koji Kondo went into MIDI and coding and wrote out all the notes, the pipe sound. It's like 72 notes. Like
it's insane.
Every little sound has notes. And so I can do that. So those are the sounds I made, but when it came to like the jumping sounds and the rock smashes, I'm just like, I'm not suited to do this because this is so over my head. So they brought in a couple other guys to do that. And one girl, Shannon, they crushed it. They did an amazing job. Which, by the way, was one of the inspirations for me creating a contacts library with the instruments, because Shannon early on asked me, she's like, hey, do you have all these samples that I could use to turn into sound effects? And so I'm like, nope, but you're about to, because that sounds amazing. So something as simple as the coin sound, when you get the coins in the game, it goes, it's just sped up like 1,000 times, and it's super high pitched. So she took like my marimba sounds and she made a little jingle out of it and made her own sound effect using my custom sound. So I thought that was super cool.
That is really cool.
Like, that's
co-working at like an A-rated level.
Yeah. So I can't take any credit for sound effects in this game. I mean, I tried and failed miserably and said, all right, guys, I got to pass the torch. This is not my...
But is this something you want to kind of continue to explore, or do you want to keep yourself into only composing music?
I don't know. That was a pretty rough failure. So I don't know. Maybe. I didn't love it like I thought I would. So, but I love writing music and I'm good at it and I want to keep doing it. So I don't think so.
Yeah. But then,
because there are guys like Matt Kramer, who's in the chat earlier, like he's phenomenal at it and he crushes it. And I've watched him go through his process where he does it for real, and he'll like the whole process he creates it from scratch, and it's just. Or even like Akash Dakar, who did Hyper Light Drifter. You watch these guys make sounds. It's like this is not just their side hustle. No, like this is their thing.
Yeah. Like you're passionate about music.
I've put into music. They're like creating sounds with like 72 layers. And,
it's insane when you're looking at that. Like you're saying, seeing all these layers. Like this is just a basic sound for hitting someone. Yeah, you have like no one understands how intricate this is.
But a guy like Matt, when I was he did a stream not long ago, a couple weeks ago when the game released, he did a stream talking about his sound effect process. So maybe that's up on Twitch, I don't know. But he talked about how like the punch sound effect, it changes animation wise. It's random every time you do it. So he wanted him to all of his sound effects, he made several variations. So it's like punch A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever, and that way it just randomly cycles every single time. It's a different pitch, different timbre. Like that's what it means to be a sound designer.
Exactly.
It's making all the variations and the programming. It's just a different world that I'm not interested in, but he is. So, props to Matt.
Yeah. So one last question I have concerning the Beard Blade here, and specifically this one. You talked a little bit about the inspiration for Zelda here. And specifically, you said you recently completed the Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is also one of the soundtracks in the Zelda series that actually sticks out a lot. They shows a lot more ambience to it. They don't have all the classic versions of the music that we usually hear, like Hyrule Castle and so on, even though they're still there. So taking this specifically from Breath of the Wild as an inspiration was pretty interesting. What was it, because that was the game you played recently, or did that track specifically made such an impact on you to have it as a reference?
I don't think you can separate the two, but yes to both. So like the game itself had a huge impression on me, but that because the game had such a big impression, that track and the moment that it captured was so emotional after more or less lots of silence in the game.
Yeah.
So, and that theme was so interesting. I love it. And it was also in my head because at that point I had just stopped doing cover music for like 10 years. And then I worked with a brass duo called Dual Play, which is a cover band that does brass covers of video game stuff. And they commissioned me to make a bunch of arrangements for them to play for their live touring.
Yeah.
And one of them was Hyrule Castle. So that was my long way of saying it was in my ears constantly because I was trying to remix it and do like this dubstep version of it with brass. Super interesting. And so it was really in my head. And I think that there's a lesson there that if we are constantly listening to the things we love, it's going to come out in our music in positive ways.
Yeah.
I think it's a positive thing. I hope I never want to plagiarize and I never want to copy my heroes, but I hope that it just kind of naturally comes out. And I always get a kick out of when people say stuff like, and they've been saying today about, that sounds like Final Fantasy and Mega Man, and like, how many different games have we talked about today? I love all those things, but I didn't try to reference those things.
But
it just kind of comes out, you know?
It is also interesting that you want to have references sometimes, and maybe you want to make an homage to some extent, but at the same time, it's like you said, you don't want to plagiarize something and copy outright something. It's kind of hard sometimes making music, I think. Or how do you feel as a composer? How does that world feel? Are you super afraid, or are you more laid back now?
Oh, there's no fear over that. A good example of that is the original title screen. I did 100% rip off Super Smash Bros. Melee. I can't even sing it right now, but it's like... I didn't know that I plagiarized it, but when I sent it to them, they're like, dude, this is straight up Super Smash Bros. Melee. They sent me a YouTube link. They're like, try again. And I listened to it. I was like, dang it. But I didn't know it.
Yeah.
You know, it's in my subconscious. So sometimes it does take someone else listening to go, no. That is definitely not yours. So I tweaked it until it was mine. Yeah. I think version 2 became bum ba da bum 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 ba dum bum bum ba da dum bum ba dum, which is very close, by the way. And they said, this is teetering on plagiarism. It's just too close. Try again from scratch. Yeah. And then it became what we now know as the Beer Playing theme, which is now dum bum 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 ba da ba da da dum bum ba dum, which is now in almost all the tracks in some hidden way. Yeah. So I'm glad we knocked that out of the way first before I snuck in Super Smash Bros. Over the whole thing and got every copyright strike known to me. So there you go.
So check.
I mean, sometimes you don't know you're doing it.
That is the hardest part. There's so much music today out there. It's impossible kind of not to plagiarize to some extent, it feels. Because sometimes it could be like something super niche. This person created it like 10 years ago. Yeah, but only like 1% of the human population is listening to this thing. So it's so insanely crazy how everything, and you might specifically need another person, but that person might never have played Smash Bros.
Exactly.
Then everything goes live, and then everybody who's playing the game is like, "This is plagiarism to this." So that is the more weird things that may come to mind, and what would happen at that part, we don't know. Maybe you would have to patch the game with a new track or something like that, but hopefully we don't need to do that for this one. Though,
I find myself, now that I've just written a lot of music into the thousands of tracks at this point, I pretty often now rip off myself on accident. I'll start writing something and I'm like, ooh, this is a nice theme, and then wait a second, that's from this other game. And I will openly admit this right now. I think I did it. I think the end credits to both Beardblade and Monster Sanctuary are freakishly similar without knowing it. And it's like, oh no, because both of them, just my own personal reference, my favorite in credits of all time is Super Mario 64, because it's so melancholy. It's like this pure joy because you finished the game, but also pure sadness because you finished the game.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the mood I always want to give. And I was writing these both around the same time, and I think it's probably there. So forgive me if that's... But what's funny, though, is if anything, the only copyright strike is I'm doing it to myself.
Yeah. Copyright yourself.
Yeah,
that would be
so
hilarious.
really
Maybe that is
danger.
your unique part. In every game you make, you will make the same end credits for each and every game. That would be hilarious.
It started off as the track we played, the first one, the Shallot Shipyard Day. That is the end credits theme. Because the team said that's their favorite track after I wrote it. They're like, that's our favorite. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's make this the credits theme.
Yeah.
We'll just use every instrument group that is in every level. So the credits theme, it's like changes every 10 seconds to represent the progression of the game using those instruments, which that was my second favorite track, probably, but I am a stickler of credits themes. I almost didn't put it on the soundtrack because I feel like you have to earn it.
Yeah.
Instead of being handed the cheat. Like, here you go, you won the game, you don't have to play it now.
Yeah.
But I have to side with the people who don't like spoilers, who want to play the game. They're not going to listen to the soundtrack until they've finished the game anyway. So it kind of serves both camps, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. That's nice. So yeah, that is basically it for the Beardblade soundtrack here. And is there anything else you think we missed about the soundtrack specifically here?
I think you did a great job. I would just encourage people to go play the game and to go listen to the soundtrack for themselves. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Especially while playing. So please buy the game. That is the best way to support the developers as well.
Yes.
Not you necessarily. I don't think you're getting royalties, I guess.
I don't, no, but I want a second game.
Yeah. Let's hope for a second game then.
And for those who want to see this game on other systems, other consoles, like that's how you do it. You buy the game and it gives them the revenue to get the licenses and to do all the bug fixes and all the things. All the updates it takes to get to those. So
yeah, but if you really want to give you money, then start listening to the Spotify soundtrack today. On repeat.
Yes. And for the select few of you, all one of you who want the actual downloads, it's actually on one of my sites, simplesamplesaudio.com. You can actually just Google search, just type in Beardblade Original Game Soundtrack, and it's one of the first links that comes up. You can actually buy it outright and get the MP3s if you wish.
Yeah, I was trying to check it out to buy it on Bandcamp, but you took it down.
I did because of this official release, because that was a mess. Because back when I thought this game was coming out 5 years ago, I had a Bandcamp of just like 20 tracks to kind of show off. This game does exist. It is coming for those who care. But Bandcamp I don't want to bash them because some people make good money on Bandcamp. But to me, I've never done well at Bandcamp. So I'd rather have people be able to buy it outright or stream it, but not both at the same time.
But I'm always up to, and this is what the podcast is about, to bring forth the composers into the light and how they are able to support you in the best kind of way. And usually it is to buy, even buying the soundtrack, even buying merch, if some composers do sell that as well. There are some crazy developers even making these small cassettes that they play the music on, which I love as well, even though I don't have a cassette player, but I just love having those kind of small tokens. I got some vinyl. Vinyl is getting more popular again as well. So seeing Beardblade on a vinyl would be amazing.
That would be cool.
That would be real cool.
Yeah, and something you didn't say, but I think one of the best ways to support the team, besides buying the game, is to leave a review on Steam,
so other people can find the game.
So valuable,
definitely,
because that's kind of free PR for the game, and it helps show real numbers of people that care about it. Even if you want to leave constructive feedback, that's also very helpful. Because no one believes this is a perfect game. No, there is no perfect game.
No,
but they I was actually talking with the team last week after reading a bunch of the Steam reviews. People are brutally honest, for good or not. And they are praising the things they love, and they are very mean about the things they don't like. That's okay. Like, that's still helpful, because the team can read, okay, there's like 100 people saying the same thing. We probably should fix that bug, or we should probably add some unlockables here, or whatever. Like, they take that to heart. They can't do it all, but
they do what they are able to. We usually call that in game development bang for the buck. What amount of time can you put down in order to make it still profitable, basically? So you don't want to put in like 6 hours for a small bug that like never happens, but it happened for like 2 people. So it's always a priority you need to kind of take a look at. And Shredder here says that VGM composers are like the unsung heroes, and I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, they are. I'm not even talking about myself, just the ones I've met. The composers put a lot of work that's never seen.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful and grateful that we live in an age that I can release a soundtrack that has half of the sounds, like half of the tracks that I wrote that didn't get used, that I can still share them with the world because I have the rights to them. And it's not about making money at that point. It's just I want to share them, and I put a lot of love and heart into those things that never came.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for me, to kind of have that check mark of I finished the project, now I can mentally move on to something else.
But is that...
It kind of lives on. You know?
Is that something you want to strive for? You want to have the ownership of the soundtrack? Or will that become from...
When possible.
Yeah. So it will, depending on which project and what the developers want themselves and so on, then...
Yeah. And I'll be frank that my working relationship with Beardblade and Monster Sanctuary, just because they're very similar games, vastly different.
Yeah.
And one, it's not right or wrong, but because Monster Sanctuary they have a AAA publisher, Team 17, who also does a lot of big games.
It sure does.
They had to play by different rules, and we had to negotiate very different contracts. And it is like night and day difference, as they're like polar opposites of what you can expect as a composer. And even the next soundtrack I'm working on right now is even more different.
Yeah.
And it's very peculiar. It's like, how does anyone make a living in this industry? Because it's like it changes every day. Every soundtrack is just a different experience, and you just kind of.
But as they say, it is hard to get into composition today. There's a lot of people working with this who want to make a living out of making music. It is super hard. I'm going to have a interview with another composer, and specifically from that one, I know they talked about, if you're not super passionate about it and you are able to do something else, then do that other thing. Don't go into music. Yep. And that is so crazy. That's insane in my opinion. But it's true, yeah.
But if that is something that people do want to get into, I have this lovely book. Family First Composer. That's what it's all about. It's the top 25 questions that I've gotten over the last 10 plus years from composers trying to make a living out of this. And I walk through my experience of the 25 to 30 different income streams that can come from music composition.
Okay.
And it might be very helpful for some people.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. So yeah, let's kind of close up the Bearded Blade part of this. So do you have any projects that you are able to talk about? What are you working on now?
Right now, the only thing I can share is working on, it's an audio drama called Dark Dice, which has the potential of turning into some other properties, which is really cool. And that's where I'm using a lot of the hurdy-gurdy and the hammered dulcimer, a lot of medieval stuff. And it's just wildly different than Beardblade or Monster Sanctuary. These chiptune, very happy soundtracks. It's nice, though. It's like, it's a nice release to get to do something so different. These really dark, big, epic soundtracks with live musicians. I mean, that's a dream come true right there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, that's There's some other things in the works, but that's all I can
tell. There is some difference in making like video game and audio drama when it comes to music-wise. What's the biggest difference composition-wise, would you say?
I don't know if there is a difference. I say that because specifically for this team, because they are branching into other territories, they want to use this for other things. They want to pitch this for other things and other IPs. I think when you start getting to this level of ownership, I'll put it that way, when you start getting publishers involved and other large entities, there's a lot more red tape, right? So you want your music to be used in as many ways as possible. So practically what that looks like for me is I'm doing a lot of layers. So when I write a 5-minute track for Dark Dice, which is currently an audio drama, which this music might play on repeat for 30 minutes, right? Or they might want to strip out all the layers and only have a solo instrument playing. And then they bring in the drums and they bring in the choir. And it creates an ebb and flow.
So they have a more dynamic kind of... and that is something that is also getting more and more popular within game music as well in development. You have this software called Elias, for example, which is basically just working with layers, but you use all these layers to get all these unique tracks. And you have all these kind of different kind of set marks. For example, if the player has low HP, then you will play like a unique part within everything, which is super interesting. And I really like where this is going, especially for composing and the music that we'll bring with this. But if people find you interested, how can they support you or follow you and ask you questions?
You can just go to my website, stevenmelin.com, see all the things I'm up to there. I have a tendency to be working on way more things than I should at one time, and it changes a little bit. So that's probably the best. That's my hub. That'll link you out to my different businesses and what I do. But one thing is for sure, video games are kind of the one through line that has been in my life, whether it was originally just playing games, something I've always done, playing video game music, doing covers, which turned into composing for games, and now even a lot. I consider it game development. I mean, when I'm constantly having discussions with developers about how do you want this implemented in the game, and you're making layers, and you're talking about Elias Studio or Wise or Fmod, these things, these tools that help us create interactions with the music. It's so much fun, and it takes it to this totally different level. And in my career in the last few years, the contact programming side, very unexpected left field part of this industry, I never thought I'd want to get into, but it gives me the power to make my own instruments, even if it's a Hollywood type score, that is a big orchestra, choir. How can we make that different and interesting? Well, make your own samples. That's a great way to do that, to have your own sound.
So one other question, I don't remember who, I was actually checking who asked it. It was somewhere in the middle of it. But basically it was a question here. As an inspiring video game music composer, do you have any tips on how to create your own portfolio? It was Shredder Wannabe who asked.
The short answer is, if you're proud of something you write, put it out there, put it out into the world.
Make remixes.
I mean, put it on YouTube, put it on SoundCloud. If you want to release it, Spotify, etc., do that. You can make money from everything you do. Obviously, you want to be proud of your work. You want to just put crap out there, because then people will know you for the crap. So you don't put everything out, but if you're proud of it, you're like, yeah, let's go. There's a lot of ways that you can license your music. There's a lot of ways you can do game packs. You can do one-off licenses, all these types of things that can help with that. And honestly, not to push you to the book, but go read the book. It's all about that.
It's always good to have some more
it's a reference.
Good reference material that you can go back and read from time to time. That is really helpful. Another thing I can throw in that I actually interviewed another person who was like a fanatic of FPS. He actually made his own FPS tribute album. So he kind of took reference from Quake and Doom and just made his own kind of album if he made music for one of those games. Yeah. So that is something you can do as well. Make tribute albums to a genre that you are more drawn towards. If you like RPGs, make an RPG with a store music and overworld music and so on. So that is my kind of suggestion from my experience.
Yep, and to put this out there, the reason I hired Peter Jones as my co-composer for Monster Sanctuary, which is a large soundtrack, I hired him because I heard his stuff on SoundCloud. And I don't really use SoundCloud, but one day he posted something he did. And it was the exact style I wanted to have a relationship with someone that did that. And he was already a good friend. So you put those two things together, he's your first call.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and you got to build a relationship first, but you also have to put out to the world that you are writing. You're actively writing, and, you know, you did something last week, not 5 years ago. Even if it's not your best, like, you're working. You are an active person. No one hires inactive people.
Yeah. If you made like one track 1 year ago and then you haven't done anything since, it's hard to get a good glimpse of what the person is doing and is he keeping his skill sharp, because composing and game developing, like 90% of the skills you can utilize in your daily life, is something you need to continuously work with.
100%.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that is it from my part of the soundtrack. Cool. And we talked about you, where they can reach you. So with that said, I will just take my usual ending post here, and then we can just take a quick small talk about the next thematic, because I think you will be interested in that one as well.
Sounds good.
So other episodes of Finally Game Music, you'll find those on our homepage, Videospelsklubben.se, Spotify, or in your closest podcast app. Feel free to follow any and comment on our social media, such as Facebook or Instagram. Just search for Finally Game Music and it will get you there. If you would like to hear your name within one of these episodes, then feel free to request a song for an upcoming episode by commenting on any of our social pages. You can also support this podcast for future content updates and for future quality updates. And also, in the end, we will help future composers that are going to get out there. And this is, in a way, we take financials from the Patreon and we'll just post it towards a new composer that might require a new guitar, a mix, or something. It's like a fund that we will just help out. So our current awesome backers that we have today is Mikael Sjöberg, Andreas Nilsson, and Daniel Onemark. Thank you so much for being a part of this project. And links to where you can either buy or support, in this case, Steven Melin, you'll find those in the main post of Videospelsklubben.se. And the next thematic that we're going to talk about next week is boss themes. Don't you like them or love them, Steven?
That sounds lovely. That's my bread and butter.
Yeah, do you have any specific boss theme that you would say is that is your favorite one, maybe? Or one you go back to often?
I will say what... Okay, my favorite to listen to, probably the Ganondorf battle, Zelda Ocarina of Time. That's one of my tops.
Ocarina of Time, yeah.
Yes.
I was...
I'll say number 2 is Star Fox 64 boss battle theme. So good. Also Koji Kondo, same guy.
That is... Just listening to Corneria is one of my favorite ones. And even in remix mode, it is fantastic. But yeah, out of the spot, I was like, favorite boss themes. I was like, I don't know if I have like a favorite one, but there are a couple of good ones out there.
The Ridley theme from Super Metroid.
One I usually go back to, I would say the Storm Eagle from Mega Man X. Also because the riffs there is so freaking good.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many good ones, man.
Robin Appelqvist is like, he'll say Dark Souls.
I know. I mean, I'm a little done with Dark Souls right now. I love it. But you spend too much time with your favorite thing, you're like, okay, let's move on.
Definitely. You can only take as much. But yeah, that is it for my podcast, and it was really fun talking to you, dissecting your brain a little bit on how you work with music, and it was actually exciting to do it live stream. I'm actually not that nervous anymore.
It's fun.
It's actually just having a chat here. It kind of helps, and it's fun. Yeah. So thank you all for staying out in the chat, who joined in. And yeah, you'll find this podcast on Spotify and everything. I will write it in the chat for you guys, so you know.
Yeah. And I hope you know you got 400 listeners right now.
So. That is amazing.
I don't know why no one's talking, but I mean, not no one, but like 10 people. That's just how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah,
you guys are awesome.
Yeah, but I'm trying to get together a good community there where everybody wants to support composers, basically, and get more information out there. So thank you so much for being a good part about it.
You got it, man. Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate you, and we'll make sure that we share this episode so others can hear it that weren't here today.
It's all about sharing is caring.
That's right. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steven. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, joining in for the live. We'll see you guys next week. Take care.